Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from the first group. My name is Muhammad Imauddin Al-Faqih as the first presenter, and Nuril Diyar Anas as the second presenter, and the last presenter is Saiful. Okay, here we are from BBI 6th semester. We would like to explain you about linguistics and psychological basis of error analysis. Okay, going on to the first slide. First slide is about introduction. Here in introduction, we are going to talk about the revolution in linguistics and psychology. With the publication of syntactic structure by Chomsky, 1957, and followed by the aspects of the theory of syntax by Chomsky as well, 1965. Structural linguistics yielded to generative transformational grammar. So that by the emerging of it, it became evident that the psychological basis of structural linguistics was not compatible with the Chomsky's theory. Therefore, to be compatible with generative transformational grammar, the behavioral psychology replaced by new theory, namely cognitive learning theory. In generative transformational grammar and cognitive learning theory, the mind is viewed as an active agent in the thinking process, and emphasis is on meaningful learning as opposed to rote learning of behaviorism. So based on the theories, learning tends to the process of thinking and meaningful learning, not just copying or repeating the materials. Going on to the next slide, it's about the definition of cognitive. I take this definition from Merriam-Webster dictionary. So cognitive acts as an adjective. It involves conscious mental activities such as thinking, understanding, learning, and remembering. Okay, the next slide. The next slide is about cognitive learning theory. David Oswald maintained that learning takes place in human being through a meaningful process of relating new events or items to already existing cognitive concepts or propositions. In other words, as a new material enters the cognitive field, it interacts with already existing materials so that it accounts for its meaningfulness. Meaning in this theory is understood not as behavioral response, but rather as a conscious experience that emerges when potentially meaningful signs, symbols, concepts, or propositions are related to and incorporated within a given individual's cognitive structure. This statement was stated by Oswald, 1967. Okay, next slide is about learning. Learning in this theory is a cognitive process because it is thought to involve internal representations that regulate and guide performance. As has been mentioned before in the previous slides, cognitive the definition mentioned before, cognitive involve mental activity like thinking, understanding, learning, and remembering, like that. because it is thought to involve internal representation that are regulate and guide performance. These representations are based on the language system and include procedures for selecting appropriate vocabulary, grammatical rules, and pragmatic features governing language use. It was stated by McLaughlin in 1987. Alright, going on to the last slide that I would like to explain. Okay, with regard to second language teaching methodology, as stated by McDonough, the teacher's principal task is either repetition nor recycling, but that of helping the student discover strategies for organizing his or her knowledge into meaningful units. In this theory, the cognitive learning theory, cognitive learning theory, a view of learning suggests that information gathered and processed by our brain, and information processing is a cognitive view. This theory is like a student-centered approach, for example, discussion, self-assessment, and presentation, etc. Okay, that's all from me, and the rest of my slides would be explained by Nuril. He's going to be explaining about transformational grammar, and the rest of it would be explained by Saiful. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nuril Anas. Today, I want to explain about generative transformational grammar and first language acquisition. The generative theory, with its typical rationalistic approach, deals with deep question and looks for clear explanation of the mystery of child language acquisition. This theory is also known as the nativist approach. The innateness hypothesis holds that all normal newborn children are predisposed to learn whatever natural language they are exposed to in the course of their cognitive development. Lundberg proposed that language is species-specific, i.e., humans are the only species that use linguistic system, and that certain modes of perception, categorizing abilities, and other language-related mechanisms are biologically determined. Language acquisition device is made up of set of principles which allow the child to work out the deep structure of particular languages. These general principles are known as universal grammar. In other words, Chomsky and his followers claimed that human languages, touch, isolate in time and speech, share universal properties while having unique characteristics as well. According to this view, the speakers of any language inherently and innately knows a set of principles that apply to all languages and a set of parameters that vary from language to language. McNeill describes language acquisition device as consisting of four innate linguistic properties. Number 1. The ability to distinguish speech sound from other sounds in the environment. Number 2, the ability to organize linguistic events into various classes which can later be refined. Number 3, knowledge that only a certain kind of linguistic system is possible and that other kinds are not. And number 4, the ability to engage in constant evolution of the developing linguistic system so as to contrast the simple possible system out of the available linguistic input. And then the child's language at any given developmental stage is systematic in that the child is constantly finding hypotheses on the basis of his observation of the data exposed to him and then testing those hypotheses in speech as well as comprehension. As the child's language develops, those hypotheses get continually revised, reshaped, or sometimes abandoned. And another concept in the field of first language acquisition is the concept of creativity in human language, which was introduced by Chomsky as a reply to the behaviorist view that utterance should be considered as learned response to specific situation. In, in Chomsky view, creativity is a peculiar human attribute and it is rule governed. The utterances we produce have a certain grammatical structure. Chomsky further claims that the control of these rules is acquired through the operation of innate processes which are common to all young children. Notice how Chomsky's views of child language acquisition contrast with those of behaviorists who believed that child language is a mirror of adult language rather than having unique qualities of its own. Okay, maybe that's all for me. Thank you very much. The last I say, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Well, I'll continue what the first and second speaker has already explained you. I'm gonna talk about similarities and differences between the first and second language acquisition. This interest has provided both linguists and physiologists alike with new insight into the way that child acquire and develop his competence in his native language. As mentioned earlier, the child is believed to make a series of hypotheses about the structure of his native language. Evidence for this to found in the productions of error children. A well-known example of hypothesis formation is the child regulation of the English irregular verb, which led to overgeneralization errors such as do, doet, and go get. This is believed to be based on the child observation of the past tense of regular verbs such as walk and talk. Observe the differences between the first and second language acquisition, where here we will talk more about the differences, the first and second language acquisition. Most important of these differences is the first. Language acquisition is a part of the natural growth of the child, while a second language normally begins after the first language has been acquired, except for children who are brought up bilingual right from birth. Well, continue. It should be pointed out that within the realm of second language acquisition itself, several important distinctions should be made, such as the age of learner, child versus adult, and the situation of learning, naturalistic versus normal. Originally, many researchers have ignored such as a variable and have considered second language acquisition as well in contrast to first language acquisition. In fact, core believe that the two processes are essentially the same. Core controversial proposition inspired to line of inquiry, namely, whether adults can learn second language in the same way that children acquire the first language. Number two, whether the child can learn a second language in the same way they acquire the first. They're the first. Sincock study has been widely cited as one of the earlier attempts to find similarities between adult and second language learning and a child's several first language acquisition. It will be discussed in some detail here. Well, will talk more about the similarities between adult second language learning and first language acquisition. An experiment which deal with the immunization and comprehension of the relative clauses in English. Cook found similarities in the performance of varying adult and native children. More specifically, she found that varying adult made the same kind of alternation in the immunization of sentence with relative clauses as native children. One of the interesting findings of Koch's experiment was that many of mistake one had long accept as typically varying were made by native children. Well, it should be found out in passing that there are great differences between EFL and ESL with regard to teaching and learning of English. An ESL situation provides that the learner with example language input and communicative opportunities as English first is wide range of function within the community. Whereas in EFL situation, the learner's exposure to the target language is conferred to classroom situation. Maybe that all what I can deliver to you. The last I say, thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.